Hi and welcome to another episode of the Op Sy Voete Rugby channel. In this episode, I'm going to be looking back at some clips and performances for the recent New Zealand-Australia Rugby Championship Round 2 fixture, or Bledisloe 3, and discussing some player ratings and awards. Now, for those that have seen my previous videos, I'm doing something a little bit differently this week. I'm splitting up the content into 2 clips to make for easier viewing. This one being the player performances segment, and another one which you can find right over there for some interesting strategic analysis and content. At the end of the episode, I'm also going to be giving out my Man of the Match Performance Award, so be sure to stick around for that. Right now though, let's have a look at how the players stacked up. Now I've started with the player that generated some buzz with his inclusion, the big strong centre SAMU KEREVI, and boy did this guy make an impact on the field. Now, just as a reminder, every week I'm giving the players a rating out of 5 beers. SAMU takes home 5 out of 5 for his impressive run on the night. KEREVI had 21 carries in this game, which puts him tied with Jasper Wiese for most carries across the tournament, and that's after just one game. It looked like Dave Rennie just used the good old get the ball to KEREVI strategy, and it largely worked for them. KEREVI has a keen eye for where the space is and is really good at choosing his running lines. Here in the 47th minute, just look at KEREVI's work rate, both in stripping the ball from Scott Barrett, not an easy task, lining up for the counter-attack and spreading the ball wide, possibly resulting in a try for Tom Banks had Rieko Ioane not so incredibly sprinted down the field to stop the play. It's interesting because it really puts some pressure on Rugby Australia regarding the ghetto law. Now, the ghetto law just states that no player may play for the Australian national rugby team if they're playing rugby overseas and they have less than 60 caps. That rule is there in order to stop talent drain out of the country. But with KEREVI's performance, they might just have a bit of a rethink. Rennie referenced this in his post-match interview when asked about the revival in South African rugby in 2018, and his comment is quite telling.
Yeah, I think Rusty picked his team from Europe, so that might have made a little bit of a difference.
That might just be the best clue to date. Next up is the speedster Rieko Ioane, and man does this guy have some pace and skill. Ioane had 90 run meters, the most for any New Zealand player, with 8 carries and 4 defenders beaten. After 2 rugby championship games, Ioane now has the most combined run meters for any player across the tournament at 170 meters. I really like Ioane on the wing instead of centre field. His pace and good decision making makes him an incredibly dangerous weapon, especially on counter-attack. Ioane was also instrumental in stopping that Banks try on the 47th minute, both lining up Tate McDermott and then shifting with enough pace to catch Banks down the sideline. Seriously incredible stuff, which just goes to show how valuable Ioane is on the wing. Now, this next player might be the most controversial of my ratings, as I understand many people are really talking up Tate McDermott as a result of his ability to attack around the ruck. Now, that is absolutely a strength of McDermott's. We saw this several times in the 3-match test series against France, and it has developed into a powerful weapon for Australia. McDermott had the most defenders beaten for Australia in the game, and an impressive 90 meters from 9 carries. But on critical aspects related to scrum half play specifically, for me, he is lacking. In the modern game, the scrum half is an incredibly important position because the play no longer so significantly pivots off the number 10 fly-half position. And it's in those areas that I feel McDermott is a little undercooked. His passing game is substandard, his kicking from ruck is almost always too deep, and his choices for runners are a little too obvious and easy to read. Here, in the 12th minute, Bowden decides to go for the intercept. McDermott clumsily decides to release the ball anyway, and the pass is so slow to arrive, even Bowden Barrett overruns it. It's a turnover and New Zealand is on for the counter-attack. McDermott has exciting moments and he is a good prospect, but he still has some development in front of him. Next up is probably another controversial rating. This is a player which is widely criticized after the Wallabies loss, but I feel unfairly so. For me, Tom Banks had a good outing for the Wallabies with some moments of absolute madness spread in between. Now, to be frank, I've never really had a phenomenal impression of Tom Banks. He didn't impress me in that 3-match test series against France, but against New Zealand in the past few games, this guy has convinced me of his value at fullback. Banks was strong under the high ball when New Zealand made the kicks contestable, which is going to be very useful against South Africa. He chewed up some really good space on penalty kicks when he had the chance. He made some good, strong defensive reads, but then Banks was also responsible for another inexcusable moment of play when he kicked the ball dead after the Jordie Barrett red card penalty. An absolute shocker. With ball in hand, though, is where Banks proved himself the most. He had 110 meters in total on the night, the highest of any player on the field. He also went over for the Wallabies' final try of the game, restoring some dignity to the scoreline by running a good supporting line to Nick White and choosing his running line very, very well. Not a bad outing for him at all. With Sam Whitelock missing this week, Scott Barrett got the call up for the number 5 jersey and really delivered a solid performance in the game. Scott's performance sometimes goes a little unnoticed because the work that he does is not what would feature on a highlights reel, but it is equally important and sometimes just slows the ball down enough for his team to reset. Scott's speed is also really impressive. I can't forget the image of Scott Barrett shepherding Johnny May to touch, and that pace serves Scott so well when he's able to just get to the ruck a few seconds earlier. His fitness also means he is involved in multiple phases of play. Here in the 16th minute, tracking back and stopping pressure from Australia, getting back in line and popping a ball neatly to Laulala. Scott was also responsible for the good tackle on Valentini that forced the wayward intercept pass to Perenara, which led to one of the All Blacks' tries. Scott Barrett also made an impressive 13 tackles, the second highest on the evening, and had some pretty good defensive reads, almost swallowing up McDermott whole from the line out and then charging down McDermott's kick from the base of the ruck. I was really impressed with the big fella on Sunday, and it just goes to show the depth that New Zealand have amongst their loose forwards. So now, for the Player of the Match Performance Award, and as you probably would have guessed by virtue of elimination, that award goes to the loose forward with the most complete game that you could ask for, AKIRA. He is an incredible physical presence on the field and put in a number of good hits on the night with 9 tackles in total, some of them really driving the Australian ball carriers back. He competed well in the line-out on New Zealand throws, and he put some real pressure on the Australian line-out. But it was on attack that AKIRA really stood out. The Wallabies struggled to stop AKIRA from gaining extra meters after the tackle in the first half. And in the second half, it looked like they stopped trying entirely. Some of these tries are just such a joy to watch as a rugby fan. It almost looks like a Jonah Lomu highlights reel. IOANE brushing off defenders like flies on his way to the try line. AKIRA's dummy years also just so superb by fixing Lolesio before finally handing the ball to Jordan for the try. A truly well-deserved man of the match performance. Finally, some guys that deserve a mention in this game are Michael Hooper. Again, a standout performance for him as the talisman for that Australian team. Ethan Blackadder was also really good for the All Blacks since he came onto the field, and David Havili also had an impressive all-round performance, also scoring that first intercept try and running the length of the field. So that's it for my player ratings this week. Please let me know below in the comments what you thought, and as always, if you liked the episode, please give it a thumbs up or subscribe to be notified of any further content. There are some big games coming up again this weekend. Until then, enjoy yourselves, bly op jou voete.